Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog Season 2, Episode 26. And I am recording this Monday morning, February 2nd. I guess it's Monday afternoon now, technically, because I'm on my lunch break. So we just finished playtest, and yeah, now I'm on my lunch break, and so figured I would get caught up. Back home now, which is nice. It's been nice to be home, back in my own bed. I gotta say, sleeping in a hotel bed for 2 weeks kind of stinks, and so being back in your own bed feels nice. Getting to see, the wife and kids. So, yeah, things are good. Spent most of the weekend watching some of the cups. Actually hopped on Froden's stream for a little bit, so hopefully if you guys got to see that, answered some good questions there. And then actually, so I had some, my Lorwyn Eclipsed cards were here, so I opened all those, got those all sorted, was able to organize those, order the last few I was missing for that set, because I'm still, slowly putting together Magic sets, and yeah. Otherwise, generally a pretty quiet, uneventful weekend. I think the one TFT game I played that was worth talking about, because I only played a couple, was a game where I managed to play Yordle Reroll because I hit Worth the Wait Rumble. And so it was like, well, what else am I going to do? And I did make it all the way to 4-star Rumble, did make it to Ziggs 2, and was able to beat a Baron 2 comp with that. So that felt pretty good. So first placing with Yordle Reroll, Teemo 3, Ziggs 2, Rumble 4 was pretty cool. So definitely, again, one of those really special case scenarios, but yeah. The other thing is I had a bunch of packages waiting for me when I got home. I had some of the Riot merch I had ordered, including the socks I posted on Twitter, or we've got like this little Chonk here. This Chonk statue came in that's pretty cute and adorable. I'll try to wear it sometime this week on this, but I also had my Rumble jacket for winning the TFT Rumble. It comes with 2 patches, so I want to get those patches put on before I showed you guys the jacket, but it's pretty cool. The arms are really heavy on this thing. But that was pretty cool. So yeah, just mostly like cleaning all that up, doing the paperwork from my travels, things like that. So I don't know. Overall, a pretty chill weekend though. And so yeah, now it's back to work. Cool. So as far as Walk the Dog goes, you guys have been posting a lot of questions. I also posted that form where people who were watching this who aren't on my Discord could post questions. Generally, those forms questions have been hit or miss. The occasional person who likes to swear at me and call me the N-word and things like that. And the occasional question of like, here's some good things to answer. So between the Discord and those question forms now, I think I have a lot of questions to go through. So I will try to answer the ones I can. The big thing though is, so if I don't answer your question, just know that it's a combination of one of 2 things. Either A, it's something I've answered before, or B, it's something that's like not really that interesting a topic. Maybe I'll sit down one day and actually just do like a YouTube video where I power through a lot of the questions that are like simple 2-word answers. Because I try to pick questions on here that are things I can talk about for longer than like 3 minutes. So just be aware of that. So speaking of which, let's do the first question for today. Because again, like I said, I have a lot of questions, so I wanted to do some good ones here. The first question is for a champion like Galio, who does not count as a unit on your main board, so he's essentially +1 free unit. What is his power level determined by, and is he closer to a 4 cost? Generally, I would put him close, like if you tried to equivalate it to like an actual like number, I would say equivalate, that's not a real word by the way. I would put him at like a 4.5 kind of power, maybe a 4 cost in power. But generally the approach was, if you think of him more as part of Demasia's trait, right? Like in a way, the Demacia 7 piece is rewarded with a summon trait that is this extra unit. And so it's part of the trait's budget. Now I know what you're thinking. You're like, well, wait a minute. You don't have to play 7 Demacia. And it's true. But like realistically, you kind of have to work your way to 7 Demacia. So at some point you have to play 7 Demacia. And it's almost like if we made a trait that was like, hey, play 7 piece for 2 rounds and we'll give you an item. Like, would we ever ship that trait? Maybe someday. I mean, to some extent, that's what Bilgewater is, right? Bilgewater is play the vertical, farm some stuff, and then shrink it back down. And so Demacia is this abstracted into a champion power, which is play 7 Demacia, will give you this extra unit. It's one of the reasons why the jump from 5 Demacia to 7 Demacia is really small, right? Like, you don't actually gain any armor and MR. I believe the numbers are still currently the exact same. All you do is gain that little bit of true damage on rally, which is not a lot, but really what you're gaining is access to Galio. And so that's where a lot of his power budget comes from, is that trait, rather than him being a specific flex unit. And then we knew that sort of like the difficulty of like, especially because of the star levels in particular, it's like, unless you're going really vertical Demacia, you're not going to like buy all the Demacian units and then sell them all once you hit 12 star levels, only to play Galio. And then you still have to find Galio 2, right? So it's like, we knew that hoop was going to be too hard to jump through to sort of make him just a, just a thing that you'd flex around. So in a way, he has sort of become the like 5 cost of Demacia. Now, this was intended, and this was actually one of the pinnacles of the unlock system and the things it was trying to solve, right? Because if you look at any pass set and you pick a 5 cost that was part of like a vertical origin, the problem was you would only play that 5 cost in that vertical origin, right? It was like, I'm trying to think of some examples. Sorry, I can only think of 17 right now, and obviously I can't talk about that. But I think the reality is, if a 5 cost isn't something that you're tempted to play, that's a problem. And so we wanted to make the base 5 costs generally very threat-like, so that you would always be tempted to play them. But that doesn't mean we want our cool vertical origins to not have like a neat finisher at the end. And so Galio is an example of a really cool finisher if I want to play verticals. Because the reality is, a lot of our player base really likes verticals. I mean, if you watch our Monday morning meta reports, all the augment stats are around verticals being strong, and up until this set, verticals were basically the main way to play. So having a cool 5 cost that can cap out your comp, we've been calling them capstone champions, is a good thing. But having those be behind the unlock system was a great way to budget that in a healthy way. I think if Galio were part of the main set, but he required 5 Demacia to even be played, you'd be annoyed when he showed up in your shop, And so it creates an opening for designs that we couldn't normally do. So generally, that's kind of the thing here. Now, to your point, why isn't he just a 5 cost in power level? It's close. We actually started with him being a 5 cost in power level. It's interesting, if I remember back to our playtest, early on he was just like weak in general, or the big thing was when he came down and did his first slam, when he first comes in, that used to do like large amounts of true damage. But it was like that on top of Demacia, you were just like melting down comps. It was pretty insane. So then we shifted some power into his spell, and what we found was just like, if he was full 5 cost power, it felt like a free Tactician's Crown, which was a little much for Demacia. So we had to nerf him a little bit, but we've been trying to find that line between where he is successful, and powerful and satisfying, but not overbearing as a free unit. And so I think we're generally pretty close. Right now, I would say he operates a lot like a lot of our other melee champions, in that he is very good at 2-star, right? Especially 2-star with items can actually do some pretty insane things. But at 1-star, he's just kind of he's fine. But again, +1 free trait, no big deal, So that's roughly the power budget of Galio, and kind of how our approach is to thinking about him. But again, he's meant to be sort of the capstone of Demacia, was meant to mostly be played in, 5 and 7 Demacia, and that is intended. So, cool. All right, next question. Have you considered having emblems not take an item slot, and instead they have their own item slot, or maybe something like the Void mod slot to put emblems in? We've thought about it a little. Part of this is that, again, we talk about change aversion, right? Like, let's assume that was the best solution for a second. What it would also mean is we either need to take spatulas and frying pans out of the core item system, or we're basically saying core items, like you said, can go in their own extra slot. It does mean we would have champions who could have 4 item slots, which also does lead to some pretty multiplicative power cases, right? So it's like if you can have 3 items and an emblem to add to your traits. Now there is some fun to that, right? But getting an extra trait can do a lot in some cases, right? I think there are certain cases that just make this really strong. Now, it's interesting because if you look at historical TFT, there were times when traits were more powerful, and so that's when emblems in particular were really strong, right? Mage being one of the more famous examples, it's like, yeah, it turns out if you can just double cast your spell, and the only thing that gets modified is damage, but if all you care about is like CC or support outputs, then turns out that's really, really good. And so it was better than an item, so you would want that, right? But as we've leaned into a world where traits are less powerful, that makes emblems less exciting. And so I don't know if the answer is like, well, okay, in the world where traits are less powerful, emblems are less exciting, so have them take a 4th slot so they're less exciting? I don't know. It doesn't really feel right, and it doesn't feel like it's solving the appropriate problem here, right? Which is, again, we know from our augments, it's like getting an emblem as an augment would feel pretty cool, but if all the emblem does is like go in this extra slot, it doesn't feel quite as valuable as a full item, right? And so really, to me, the answer for how to make emblems more exciting was either buff traits back up, but that has pretty bad side effects, and we know that's literally one of the things we're trying to get away from this set, or, give them extra power so that they feel better than items. And I think that's why we leaned towards the second right now, where it's like, the fact that people are excited about Yordle emblem and calling it like close to an artifact is like great, because if I give you a Yordle emblem for a gold augment, well, guess what? That's about the same as giving you Trinity Force for a gold augment, which is, also a gold augment. So the power ends up being pretty close. And emblems are just a lot of fun, right? I think players generally enjoy the games where they get an extra emblem here or there. Now, obviously, the variance within those emblems can be frustrating, and the difference between getting a cool vertical that opens up new lines versus here have a single I don't know, not Bruiser, Vanguard emblem or whatever, like a tanky emblem, Warden emblem, something like that. Like those are the ones that are like, So some work to do there, but all of this is also to say that, again, the other thing you have to analyze when you're thinking through a change like this is the cost to make the change, right? So it's like, let's assume again that this is the right solution. How much time does it take to build this new UI if we go the 4th item slot, right? Can mobile support the 4th item slot? Do we have room on the champ inspect panel? Or if we use the void thing, cool, we can do that. But that also means we've now closed ourselves off from the design space of using that mod space for future traits and future things. So if we do all that, then think through the result, right? So let's say that work, and I'm just going to make a fake number here, but let's say that work takes 2 months of 4 people's time. And again, this is fake numbers. These are not real. If I spend that 2 months of 4 people's time, now before and after is the game much better, right? Because that's often the decision-making lens that you have to think through. And so when I look at that, I'm like, maybe a little. It's maybe a little better, but I don't know that it's dramatically better. I don't know that all of a sudden, because it's a 4th item slot, people are really excited about spatulas now. I don't think so. And so that's where I think, whereas if you just say, hey, if I want to take the emblems and add stats to them, I mean, that was, a 2-day project, right? It was a 2-day project to go through and give everything these extra things, test them, make sure they're generally okay, add any extra effects, right? And so that's where, again, the cost benefit has to be taken into account when making your solutions. So overall, again, have we considered it? Yeah, we've considered it. And my analysis is it's not generally worth, all the extra cost it would take compared to the benefit that we got from the much simpler solution of just giving them a little extra power and having that be successful. So that's kind of my read on it. All right, next question. Are things like Bilgewater toggling and Ishtal toggling healthy for the game when they exist? So I'm going to give a controversial answer here, which is yes, with a big giant asterisk, okay? Now I know what you're thinking. Wait, Mort just said toggling is healthy? That can't be true, right? Because we've had astral toggling before, and that was pretty insane. And that can't be okay. So where is the line, and why am I saying it might be kind of okay? Generally, having a game that has a lot of depth for people to explore and feel like they've optimized, we've talked about this before on Walk the Dog, is a good thing, right? Players going, ooh, I've learned the intricacies of the system, and I learned to manipulate a little bit, and I felt clever, and I found a cool new thing to be better. And my answer to this, and the reason I'm saying sort of yes, is because what really matters here is the impact of those micro optimizations and how big a difference they really make, okay? And let's use Bilgewater as an example. I know what Bilgewater toggling is. I've played games with it, and I've played games without it. Does it make a massive, massive difference? And I know there's going to be some challenger player who's going to listen to this when I say no, and they're going to go, what? Of course it does. But challenger players also tend to say that a 2% difference is a massive difference, right? So we have to be careful of our measurement terms here. But I would say if let's use a numeric approach here. If Bilgewater the trait is 5% better if you are toggling, is that okay? I think so, actually, right? Because toggling is sort of a clever use of like, okay, if I want a particular thing, I'm going to drop down to 5 and get that thing and then drop down to 7. Now, I will say, should we make it more intuitive? Yes, right? Could there have been things on the tooltip that said what the shops could offer? For sure, right? So don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying it's perfect. But again, if the difference in power is like 5%, I think generally you're okay. And I think having players go, actually, it's not just the boring put in the max and buy everything, but actually there's some cool optimizations you can do to get a little better. That's great. That's called depth. That's a good thing for the game. But if the difference is like 50% in power, right? If Bilgewater the trait is 50% better with toggling, then no, that's not healthy, right? Because then, much like I talked about in the Monday morning meta report today, it's unintuitive how to play the trait, and people feel like, wait, you're telling me I'm losing 50% power because I didn't jump through these extra hoops that made no sense to me? That's not really good, right? And that's why I'm saying the severity of the impact of the toggling matters in context here. So particularly with Bilgewater and Ishtal, I believe the toggling that's happening right now, or at least was with Bilgewater, is very, very low, right? It is in that 5% range. And so I think that's okay. Whereas astral toggling, for example, was much closer to that 50%. And that's where it is very much not okay, right? So again, to summarize here, I think a little bit of optimization is good. That's depth, people learn. And Bilgewater is such an interesting example too, because when Bilgewater was meta, there was a lot of debate about the right way to play Bilgewater, right? I think early on we saw people were saying it was like, save up all your money and then buy a bunch of items real quick at 7. Then it became, no, use it to tempo. Then it became, no, buy stats. Stats matter, and always buy the cheapest stats, right? Like, and so even toggling as an example was like people sort of extrapolating that, no, the way you got to play it is you got to toggle. It's like, well, was that actually the best? Not really, right? All toggling was a representation of don't forget to get the good stuff, right? It's like, if you really need a Nautilus, consider toggling to 3 so that you can make sure you find the Nautilus which has higher odds, right? And like, that's fine. Again, the thing on the Riot side I'll say is that we should have made it more clear that there was a difference in the shop, right? Dumb example would be, imagine if the shop changed colors from like bronze, silver to gold based on how much you had in, right? Like that would help at least sort of go. And if there was like a consistent rule with like which champions could appear, right? I think one of the things that's a little confusing is like the 4 costs can show up at both 5 and 7. That's a little unclear, right? So there's some intuitiveness things that would have made this better. But again, overall, if you're looking for a framework here, my framework is something like toggling is okay and adds depth if the impact it provides is minor enough to not completely warp the mechanic. And in the case of Bilgewater and Ishtal, from what I've seen, I do not believe they warp the mechanic much more than, say, a 5% advantage. And again, I'm trying to use a number here so that, because again, some challenger players are going to go 5%, that's massive. And in a challenger lobby, when you're playing at the highest ranks, you're right, that is, but that's an acceptable margin. Whereas for most players, that's not that big a difference and generally isn't worth their time most of the time. So that's kind of my answer. All right. What time we got? I can do at least one more. All right. The next one. Are there designs that were purposely made to annoy players like Fizz and Diana? The answer to this is no and yes. So I promise you that when we're like first coming up with a champion, our goal is never, how are we going to make players' lives miserable? That is definitely not the goal here. Okay, so nowhere does that happen. However, I will be honest with you, literally the very first draft of set 16 with Fizz, it says in there, Fizz is going to be the most annoying champ in the set and will frustrate players, right? Now I know what you're thinking, you're like, well, wait, you just said you don't do that, right? The goal of Fizz was not to annoy players, but we knew he would, right? The goal of Fizz was to allow some backline access that would disrupt the backline. During development, his trait was literally Disruptor, and he was meant to be, because we know that a group of our players, I'm not going to say like a large group, but a group of our players want assassins and want backline access. There is something exciting to them about jumping onto the backline, skipping the tank, and, killing a carry. It's also a nice healthy outlet, right? If there's a 3-star Scion that has 12,000 health and everything was front to back, that becomes the only strategy. Having more diverse group of strategies where sometimes you can go around, sometimes you can play assassins, sometimes you can do other things, makes the game deeper and opens up more strategic options than just 4-cost build your ranged carry, And so we knew we needed to have a backline sort of disruptive champion. Fizz was like, okay, we're going to have it be Fizz. But we also knew Fizz was going to piss people off, right? And that's less about purposely being annoying and more about understanding our audience here, which was, we have 100 champions. We can add one champion that we believe will appeal to that group of players that likes to be assassins and likes to disrupt people's backlines. We know it will annoy the 80% of our players, again, fake number, who really enjoy the more front-to-back things, but it is necessary to have both for variety, right? And so again, you can interpret that as, well, that means you intentionally added something to be annoying, but I don't think that's the case. Again, we're trying to add a content to appeal to a wide variety of players. And let's be honest, in a PvP game, some players want to disrupt and be annoying, But I think it's also been up to us to find that healthy line, right? Like, the framework we've always used is no one should be deleting your carry, your 2-star itemized carry, in the first 5 seconds of combat, right? And 2 patches ago, or last patch, whatever our time frame is now, that wasn't true, right? Fizz was, jumping back there with like a death cap JG +1 and deleting your Lysandra 2 in like 1 cast. A little too fast, right? And so like, that's not the intention. But I think now where it's like you can build these like Ginsu's Fizzes that are jumping around and being, thematically annoying is a good thing. But yeah, generally we try to avoid something that's really just going to disrupt a lot of our players. But as we explore those audience profiles, we're going to have to find some things, right? So, an example of this was actually like set 1 Hextech, right? Where, hey, we wanted to try disabling people's items because some people would enjoy disabling your items, whereas other people would be a little saddened by it. What we found was that the trade-off there was too severe, right? Like, literally items were like the backbone of your champions, and the impact of losing them, even for a brief time, was just so massive that was like insanely frustrating, right? Just like if Fizz was one-shotting champions in the first 4 seconds, right? So we have to find that line of where, things can be quote unquote annoying without being too insane to think. So I don't know. It's an interesting line, and don't get me wrong, there are days where it's like, man, it would just be easier to not ship a champ like Fizz. Like, it would make my job a lot easier. But I think there are just a lot of players that would go, wow, these sets are really boring. There's no champion like Fizz. And so we have to continue to push and find what that line is. So that's generally the high level here. But again, I don't think I've ever sat in a room, or if I have, like where someone's like, I want to make this augment and it'll annoy people. Although I say that, and Kent's working on an augment right now that's like borderline troll, but is troll annoying? I don't know. We do like to troll our players sometimes, but hopefully hopefully our trolls are generally to delight you and make you smile. I think what Kent is cooking up will make people smile and then frown, and I don't know. Kent's a troll. We're all trolls. We're all trolls in our own way. So we'll see. Okay, that is it for my lunch break. I've got to get back to work. Time to kick off some meetings and things like that. Now that I'm back, I'm actually on my computer and can like do some of my own personal work a lot more as well. So I'm sure there'll be some nights where I'm loading up the game and doing work and things like that. It's Monday right now. Patch comes out on Wednesday. Not a huge transformative patch. So yeah, don't know why the camera just changed. Weird. Okay, anyway, that's going to do it for me. Hope you guys keep enjoying these. Keep posting questions. I'm here to answer them. Yada, yada, yada. All right, that's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.